Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Show Up with Camron Gran. I'm your host, Camron Gran, and today we will be diving into further Am I the Jerks? Before I do, as a reminder for all of you out there, I'm not a therapist. I'm just somebody going along his own mental health journey, trying to give you like little tips and tricks that I've used along my own path that you can try and you can use them or not. It's up to you because you are in charge of your own mental health. I just want to make sure that we pause and reflect on that a little bit. You are in charge of your own mental health. I can only give you tips, but it's up to you to find an actual therapist, to actually get help if you need it, and just to figure out how to navigate our brains because our brains have a funny way of tricking us sometimes. With that, I'm going to dive into the first story of Am I the Jerk? I hope you guys enjoy these. They've helped me a lot because when I'm doing a lot of the DBT episodes, it feels like I'm just overwhelming people with information. So I like to do this. It's kind of like an overall summation of everything put together because DBT is all about dialectical behavioral therapy. It's all about how you can better yourself and how you can like utilize skills to become a better communicator, not only to advocate for yourself, but also to advocate for your friend groups. And what I like about this one is usually most of it has to do with bad communication. Sometimes people are just really bad people, but usually it's just because people don't always have an understanding of how best to communicate whatever is frustrating them at the time. With that, let's dive in. Am I the jerk for storming off my sister's wedding after she dead named my son? Instinctively, as somebody who isn't part of the trans community, my instinct would be, because I have friends who are trans, and usually their problem is not when people use their dead name, it's when they use their dead name as though that should be their name still, and they don't want to actually adhere to who they are now, which in that sense, I can understand somebody being upset. For instance, my friend, I've talked to them and I know them, but I've only ever seen them in person before they transitioned. So a lot of times when I talk to them, I have to like catch myself before I like say their dead name because I think of them as the last time I saw them, which is why it's sometimes harder for people. This is why picturing somebody in your head is like very important. And this is what I have repeatedly said on here is the person inside your brain is not the real person, and the person that you should try to actually be there for and trying to make them feel comfortable is the person who is the real person, not the image you have of them in your head. That is never the person that you should be answering to. You know what I mean? But with that, let me actually dive into it because I need more context. And I'll tell you what Reddit thought afterwards. But here we go. I'm a 45-year-old single father of 3. Their mom died 10 years ago. I have 3 sons, 17-year-old Andrew, 15-year-old Connor, and 14-year-old Max. Connor was born female. He is trans. He came out as a trans 5 years ago and has now socially transitioned, not yet physically. My sister, 38 female, just got married. Me and my sons were also invited. My family has known that Connor is trans for 2 years now. Some have adjusted well, some not so much. My sister is pretty indifferent about it. Her wedding was really super well organized to the last detail. She wanted all the men to wear shirt plus tie and then women's sundresses. I texted her a picture of our outfits the day before the wedding and she said, "Where's Nia's dress?" I was a bit surprised and told her not to dead name my son and that he'll be wearing a shirt and tie like the rest of the men there or we aren't coming. She said fine, and that was it. At the reception, my sister got mad that Connor was wearing a tie but didn't say much after that. When we sat down at our table, the card Nia was there. I went to my sister and she said she used the real name. I told her me and the boys are leaving and she told me, "Don't you dare cause a scene at my wedding. Nia can be a guy any other day." I called her a bigot and we left. My family says I ruined her wedding. This is not the context of which I was saying that people might have a reason for it because this is intentionally not addressing somebody how they have chosen to be or how they truly are. I understand it, but again, I'm not part of the community, so I don't know like the language of how to explain it correctly to other people, which I want to talk about that eventually. Because this is in the scenario of in conversation, she actually used it. No, you put an assigned seat and you put what has been told to you is the dead name intentionally because you're trying to backhandedly say what your beliefs are to somebody else. And that is not true because if it's your wedding, why would it matter to you? You know what I mean? Because you should be spending the time with your husband. Weddings are so hard to plan. It feels so crazy to me, but that's something that's already stressful. You would have to put on more on yourself to intentionally go out of your way to just ignore somebody's like request, especially when it's something that's so easy. Just put the name that they told you is Connor. They just put Connor down. How hard is that? You said it's been 2 years. So the fact that that they also asked that question, even though it's been 2 years, because I understand like struggling to like make sure you're using the correct vocabulary, but it shouldn't take you 2 years to adjust to the point of being like, okay, so if it's something based on like this gender, then I need to include them in that because that's how they identify. To me, I don't think that the OP is a jerk. I also don't think that the sister is very considerate. Here's my thing about the weddings. Is usually people say like on Reddit is like weddings are always up to the bride and groom, which it is, but like the parts that the bride is going out of her way to address are not what I think fall under, oh, just do what the bride wants. Her brother even offered not to come if she had a problem with it. His sister definitely had a problem with it. So the better thing for his family and for his son would have been not to come, because it's one thing to do it with your brother while Connor isn't there. It's another thing to like have a physical representation of his aunt not approving of his life and his choices. And so on that note, I think your sister is the jerk here. But then they agreed with me because the overall consensus of that Reddit post was that he was not the jerk here. And I agreed. And the fact that the family tried to go as far as to say that he ruined the wedding is crazy, because the most that he did was, okay, I asked you before we came not to treat my child this way. And then you did it intentionally, and then you did it where it was in front of everybody. So you're the one who brought the negativity into your own wedding. So you can't blame somebody else for basically your own issues. Because that's my thing with people with weddings. If you need it to be so specific and precise and you don't want to have any leeway with people, at that point, I'm like, why even have people at your wedding? You can go to the justice of the peace by yourself. If you're that particular about how people are, just saying a shirt and tie, that's fine. And a sundress for the women or people who identify as women is fine. Those are simple requests. And those are things more involved in like the wedding party. But yeah, because that's another thing is, again, this all boils down to weddings are so convoluted. Why make it more convoluted to go out of your way to try to make a point about something that has nothing to do with you? I mean, you don't even see your nephew outside of very social events. So again, very limited contact. Why even make a point about anything? I'm going to move on. But what do you guys think about that? That's something that is hard, because I sometimes struggle with saying the right pronoun. And when that's starting to happen, because eventually if I catch myself doing it, I'll overthink it and then I'll keep doing it. So then I've tried to make sure if somebody is either identifying as the opposite gender or as non-binary, I try to then make sure that I'm just saying their name. So that way it's easier for me not to mess up. And then obviously the more you wrap your head around it, and then the more you have that physical person in your brain, it's easier to condition yourself the right way. Because that was my point is I've met people who get upset if you just use their dead name, period. And I feel like there should be a little bit of a grace period of doing it accidentally. And usually you can tell if somebody is like authentically doing it on accident. Here's the next one. Am I the jerk for telling my son he deserved his girlfriend breaking up with him? Okay, getting a little tea, getting a little spicy. Okay, here we go. So, my son had a long-distance girlfriend recently for about 2 years. She was great, a really nice girl, and we all loved her, welcomed her with open arms. She was flying here constantly to visit him, like a week in a month, and he didn't lift a finger to go visit her. Listen, if you're going to long-distance somebody, and if it's going to start a relationship long-distance, you have to be willing to travel there if they're coming to visit you. If you're not willing to do that, then you risk not being with them long-term, because that's kind of the give and take of long-distance thing. Or I know sometimes it might result in having to move to be with each other sooner than you think. Effort is something that's like recognized, and with relationships, the effort you're putting into a relationship should also be returned to the same amount of effort, because if it's not, then you're like, oh, maybe they don't care for me about as much and I want somebody, which is why you have to know your values for your mental health. Like, what do you value most? So that way, if you're trying to find somebody, you know which things you're okay with, like being lenient on, or what things aren't as important to you, and what things you're like, if my partner can't give this to me, or if my partner does these certain things, I can't be with them. You have to know your values, you know, like the things that you're okay with and things you're not. It's okay to let somebody go. Let them fly off into the breeze. It's okay. Continuing on with the story, she says, I tried talking to him about it several times and told him he should really start looking into flying over to her instead of expecting her to do all the traveling. He said no, and my wife probably had something to do with it, as she constantly told him she was afraid of him flying. I spoke to them both and said this girl is great for him. She was willing to move over to our country too, but said there was one condition, that was he'd have to fly over to her country too, which is fair enough. He said no, he didn't want to fly or travel anywhere. My son was becoming lazier and lazier, eventually telling his girlfriend and us that he was perfectly fine never traveling anywhere, including holidays. etc. Last week, he told us she dumped him. I went on her Facebook page as we're all still friends. She wrote us an apology letter about how she's upset it didn't work out, but these things happen, so we're on good terms. And looks like she's with a new guy already. Me and my wife have no doubt she was seeing him while still in a relationship with my son. I confess to them both that I actually agree with her decision and he should have expected it. He did not treat her properly, and I hope he learns lessons for the next one because he needs to make more of an effort. I said he deserves it for his lack of effort in the relationship and for essentially just allowing this girl to spread all her money and time coming here all the time. Wife and son are very upset that I said this. Very, very upset, and my wife says I am being horrible. The consensus is whoever this is not the jerk, which I agree with because I have long-term dated people, and usually the major thing that I would agree with is if you are going to date somebody long-term, my number one advice for you is just to make sure that you're in a headspace to handle it. If you're going to have traveling back and forth, you each should do it at least once. I'm okay doing it once, and then if I keep doing it, how serious is this? If it's not very serious, then I need to get out of this relationship because it's a lot of money to travel. I mean, it's more expensive here in America, but and she's traveling this way, but that's the thing. It's expensive to travel to America. If he was traveling there, they could go so many different places depending on what part of the world she's from, because it's cheaper to travel on a plane when you're not trying to travel to America. I don't know what it is. Travel here is just crazy. But also spending all the effort, not willing to do anything, not willing to make plans for traveling when it comes to holidays. I once had a consensus of, okay, well, if neither of us have the money to make it to our countries, maybe we could go on vacation and go to London, which neither of us are from. And so that way they are both in a new territory, covered in the sense that we're both exploring this new area together, and neither one of us feels like it's risking anything personally. Whether or not that's safe, I don't know, but that's also life is about taking chances. And if you're going to date somebody a long distance, you have to be willing to take those chances. And it seems like your son is not. Again, the one thing I'll say about your story, you did not include actual stories or things that you said, because that'd be easier for us to dive into why they're saying that you're being very hurtful. But saying that you're lazy, I would say, I don't know if I would agree with saying he's lazy, but I'd only agree with it if, because lazy implies all around lazy. My thing I would have said is well, why are you with this person? Because if you're not willing to put in the effort back, then you really shouldn't be with them. That's not really a lazy thing. That's you need to come to terms with reality. If you don't want to give the person what they deserve, then you need to break up with them, kind of a thing. I will leave that there for you guys. Okay. On to the next story. Am I the jerk for calling my sister-in-law a racist after she compared my cooking to making Kung Pao chicken? For context, I've been married to my wife for 10 years and we're a mixed-race couple. I'm Asian and she's Caucasian. I've gotten along with her family, mother-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, but always felt like her father-in-law and other sister-in-law, Sarah, never liked me. I'm a professionally trained chef. Oh, congratulations. With 15 plus years of experience, and I work at a high-end Chinese restaurant, a spin-off of a popular one in Beijing, in a large U.S. city. My crew and I have won several awards, and I've been explicitly told I'll be the next executive chef. Well, again, congratulations. That's an awesome position that pays a lot of money compared to everybody else who works in the restaurant. But you said if it's a high-end Chinese restaurant, then get a lot of money coming in. Sarah's also a professionally trained chef and works at a popular upscale French restaurant in the city. Well, now Sarah just sounds snooty and bitter and jealous. She constantly brags about it and, no joke, compares herself out loud to Ramsay and Bourdain. Okay. Whenever I'm at my mother-in-law and father-in-law's house helping out in the kitchen, Sarah always criticizes everything I do. Whether it's chopping, braising, marinating, etc., she always butts in with comments like, I think you should actually do X like this. I've been patient for my wife and sidestepping those comments, saying things like, thanks, but I think I'll stick to the way I do it. Things came to a head 2 weeks ago when my wife, father-in-law, mother-in-law, and I were in my parents' kitchen prepping dinner for my mother-in-law's birthday. We were running a bit behind, so things were heated, which I kind of liked because it reminded me of work. And that's when Sarah walked in. She took one look at what I was doing, scoffed, and said something like, oh wow, okay, so that's not the right way of doing things. It hit a nerve, and I pretty sternly told her to stop criticizing my cooking and that I'm also a chef like her. She laughed and said making Kung Pao chicken at some Chinese restaurant doesn't count. Well, now I understand why you said, are you a jerk for saying she's racist? But just because you're doing French cooking does not mean that your style of cooking is better than somebody else's. And being a chef in a Chinese restaurant is being a chef. So that's just trying to belittle somebody else's cuisine because you think yours is better than them, which is crazy. Continuing. The kitchen went silent. Father-in-law snorted, chuckled, and my mother-in-law yelled, Sarah, what is wrong with you? I stopped what I was doing, swore at her, and called her a racist, apologized to my mother-in-law for not being able to stay, and left for home with my wife. Apparently this caused a massive fight after we left, with my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, other sister-in-law taking my side, and my father-in-law, Sarah, saying it was a joke but kind of true, and that I was being too sensitive. Not kind of true. Clearly, you don't even know what food he makes if you're just making assumptions because it's Chinese. There are so many other dishes, and saying, oh, you make this is just stupid. The extended family somehow got wind of this, and now everyone is arguing and taking sides, with my wife even getting texts from some of her cousins apologizing for Sarah's behavior. Despite being on my side, my wife is begging me to apologize so that the fighting will stop, but I refuse because of her blatant racism. Am I the jerk? Okay, well, there are updates, and I'll read those also, but overall, I say, no, you're not the jerk. 2, coming in and criticizing somebody's cooking when they're cooking for the family is just being blatantly rude. I lived in a household where you just accepted what you got, and if you didn't want to have it, you left and you made no comments. You don't get to assume or force somebody to treat you a certain way. Also, it wasn't even her house. Why are you making comments at your parents' house while you're cooking and doing something for your family? And the fact that your father-in-law had the audacity to laugh at you and not tell his daughter to stop when you were there as his guest is crazy to me. 1, I'm sorry for this, but 2, it speaks of a sense of entitlement that you should never have. Chefs are known for being hot-headed, but there's a difference between being hot-headed and being a racist. And clearly this Sarah, sister-in-law, has not found out the difference. Let's continue. Edit. My wife has also informed me that now Sarah may be in trouble at work and she's blaming me for it. Apparently one of her coworkers heard her rant about what happened and reported it to management. Edit. To clarify, Sarah's blaming me, though my wife is partly blaming me. Edit 2. So it looks like one of my wife's cousins found out this post and put it on Sarah's Facebook while going, this is you, right? Her Facebook friends are starting to comment with things like, if this is you, Sarah, then I'm disappointed. I think Sarah's still at work. She might be hitting the fan soon, and now my wife is pissed too. We'll try to update, but might have to delete posts if things go nuclear. Edit 3 update. Oh my gosh. Was considering removing, but I just got a voicemail from my father-in-law that my presence was only being tolerated up until this point. And for end of world of hurt, if I didn't delete this post. Officially going to keep this post up, and if you're still reading this, Doug, I'm very disappointed in you. You're better than this. We'll also continue to update and thank again for your support and folks. Oh my gosh. Update 4. Lots of stuff just went down. 1. My wife got a call from my sister-in-law from my wife's paraphrasing. Sarah started screaming, crying at her the moment my wife picked up and said that she just got demoted because of her Asian slur husband. Okay, well, thank you for blocking out for me, I guess. Apparently, some of her coworkers have her on Facebook and showed the post to management, which combined with her earlier rant, double whammied her back to being a line cook, and now she might get fired. My wife now solidly on my side after taking the verbal abuse from Sarah and reading some of the comments here. My wife is still the opposite of happy, though. Wife called mother-in-law and asked her what was going on with father-in-law. Mother-in-law was confused, so my wife played back the voicemail I had on my phone. Apparently, my mother-in-law literally just walked away from the phone without hanging up and started screaming at father-in-law. 3. Facebook posts now has devolved into a cluster F flame war with family and friends jumping in. Suffice to say, has officially gone nuclear. Me right now. I think I'm going to have to call this a day. We'll make an update post when the dust settles. Thanks again, folks. Edit. Turns out I'm not allowed to post an update post for some reason. No, you provided all your updates in the original post with your many, many edits. You can edit this in, but we will not be allowing a standalone update on this. Okay. I like to clarify that I got my wife and mother-in-law's permission to post this update out of respect for them and their privacy. To say, it's been kind of nuts this past week. My wife and I had to turn off social media for a bit because of the storm caused by her cousin putting my last post on Sarah's Facebook page. Some people even tried to call the restaurant I work at to get me fired as retribution. But luckily everyone there is 100% on my side. I guess it didn't help them that half of the calls involved threats, screaming, and more racial slurs. Okay. We didn't hear any updates from her family, even after mother-in-law found out about father-in-law's threatening voicemail. Still disappointed in you, Doug. But that changed on Sunday night when mother-in-law suddenly showed up at our door with overnight bags. After we took a moment to help unpack and calm down, she spilled the beans on everything. My gosh. Apparently my mother-in-law and father-in-law were already having trouble in their marriage, and it was only made worse with a certain 2016 presidential election. Okay. She's a Dem, and he had apparently gone more far-right since then. Seems that a line was crossed with the incident and his voicemail. When he refused to apologize for anything, typical Doug, she asked for a divorce and he went berserk. She didn't feel safe there, so that's when she came over. Other brother-in-law and sister-in-law live out of town. Extended family, aka the great Facebook war of 2021. You may have been able to tell already, but the extended family was largely arguing, fighting, divided along political lines for years now, and my cousin's Facebook post was likely just the light to set off the powder keg. According to my mother-in-law, the fallout has allegedly already led to some breakups, excommunication of some family members, even an argument that ended with police involvement. Haven't verified this myself, though. The drama of this one comment, oh my gosh. Sarah, sister-in-law. According to mother-in-law, Sarah came over to her place on Friday. The writing was on the wall, and she was basically forced to quit. Despite her trying to start from scratch, as the line cooked, the entire staff turned against her. Nothing was coming back from the dish pit for her, and she was getting the cold shoulder. She's a great chef. I will admit this is a true, but they took no chances since it turns out they're partly owned by a Chinese investment company. Oh my God, the karma. Found this hard to believe and didn't want to add this detail, but it turned out to be true after some research. Won't say any further for privacy. Word also got around in the local industry, and Sarah is essentially blacklisted from high-end establishments. She's now considering selling her house and moving to find work. As much as I don't like her and found her behavior horrifying, I didn't intend for this to happen, so I reached out to some buds in other states to see if they had any openings. Whether or not she wants to take it is up to her, and no, she has not apologized for anything either, but I still want to be a decent person to her. It sure as hell doesn't feel like a happy ending. Perhaps bittersweet justice, but that's all I can give you. Thank you all for your support and for reading. Still me right now. I'm going to tell you this. Congrats on you for dealing with all that. And I think that there's a saying called when they go low, we go high. And also I'm kind of the same thing. Is you kind of have to choose your moments, and it seemed like Sarah is just reaping the reward of her own bad behavior, and you weren't the one who did all the things that blew up her life. Your cousin was, so they're more responsible for what's happening to her. So you shouldn't feel obligated to find her a job, because that's not something that you went with. You were just wanting her to apologize, and the fact that you're trying to get her a job in the industry, even though she made fun of you and hasn't apologized yet for it, it's nice of you, but it's just, she doesn't deserve that from you is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, like the fact that she worked at some place that is Chinese owned and that she didn't think of that before she said all these things is crazy. But again, here's the thing with social media nowadays, like you can say something out of like a heated anger, and then like you can reap all the consequences of that. And then you try to say, oh, I didn't mean it in that context. But people have to be willing to listen for you to get those kind of like forgiveness things happening. But man, the instant karma that followed all this is just, wow. I'm just like, wow, crazy and awesome. I respect people who want to stick by family no matter what, but like make sure like when you're doing all these things, I would just pause for a second and think, would they do this for me? And it's not like you can still do some things for Sarah. I would just make sure that you're not putting in 200% on somebody who may not even give you 100%. You know what I mean? Because we all have a finite amount of energy to give to other people. And I just would rather personally you give it to other people who actually are deserving of your effort and your respect. But that is a crazy, crazy story. No way you knew that all that was going to happen based on one comment. Man. Well, with that, everyone, I think I'm going to leave you guys for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope that you remember, as always, to show up for yourself because you matter. I would say open yourself up to the possibility. Because as proven by the post that I just read, you don't always know what the end result was going to be. You only have your thoughts, which don't actually have the ability to predict the future, unless you're the best medium out there. Gosh, I'm still back in that story. I'm just like, wow. Good on you for saying, oh, she's a good chef. About like, we have the same job, and I do think she's a really good cook. But the fact that you can show her that much respect and she can't is just, that's just sad, you know? Anyways, back to what I was saying. If you guys like this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these Reddit posts. Leave me a little comment. You can give it a thumbs up. Also, if you want to see more videos in the future, the subscribe button helps me. I appreciate it so much. And I hope that if you do enjoy it, you'll tap the little bell button when I post more videos. Thank you. I will see you guys next time. And I will leave you there. I know I've said it again. I'll repeat myself. Show up for yourself, you guys, because you matter. Bye, everyone.